My name is Jenny Morrow, and I am very excited to dive into today's topic, which is separation helpful or harmful in relationships? Now, if you've been listening to the last couple of episodes, I have referenced a few times the book Mastering Boundaries. This is the textbook for this podcast, and it's a textbook for a lot of the work I do with clients as well. And so I refer back to it. If I refer to something in Mastering Boundaries and you're like, I don't know what she's talking about, go get the book, because I don't explain the book on the podcast per se, because it's all here. So there's not a lot of reason to explain it, because you can go get the book. But I will refer to a couple of things in here, because this question of is separation helpful or unhelpful in relationships in some ways depends on which level of relationship development you're at as a couple and where you're at individually. And some of that question will depend a little bit on what's happening relationally. So if you are in levels 1 or 2 and you're navigating a safety issue, then we're not actually looking at is separation helpful or unhelpful to the relationship per se. Because what's most important is that you as an individual get safe. So when it's a safety issue, if you don't have enough safety to even get to level 3, then I would say, if I were your coach in this moment, I would say I'm not concerned about whether this separation is helpful or unhelpful to the relationship. I'm only concerned about whether it helps you as an individual get safe. So by the time people come to see Bryce and I, or one of us, generally couples are not in this position. I mean, they might be considering separation because they're struggling to maintain perhaps level 3, but often because they're struggling to actually go deeper and create a more meaningful, fulfilled, advanced relationship at level 4 and 5, and they don't know how to do that. So safety issues might come up, but they're going to generally be more subtle, or they'll be more oriented towards issues of intimacy. So it might be that as long as we don't try to go up into level 4 development and go into deeper connection, like we can maintain a good friendship. There's enough safety for that. But there might not be enough safety to go into a deeper, more fulfilled experience of connection. And so again, in that scenario, we're looking at, is separation helpful or harmful to a relationship? Now, there's also a few different types of separation that we can look at. So there's obviously the physical separation of we're living together and now we're going to not live together, and see if that can help bring us back together, or if that helps clarify whether or not we even want to be together. So there's a physical separation if you've been living together. Or if you're dating, it could be like, we're going to take a 1 week or 2 week break and not have contact. So there's that type of a separation. Then there's also more smaller separations. So timeouts. Timeouts are one of the biggest things Bryce and I work on with couples, because you have to be able to do good timeouts. You have to be able to separate when you're doing intimacy development work, because it can get intense. And sometimes you have to be able to step back to navigate the nervous system regulation. Now, being able to co-regulate and regulate while together, it can be most quick and most efficient, but you have to be skilled enough to do that. And even as professional coaches, Bryce and I still need to do timeouts, because we still hit limits in terms of our skills. So sometimes we have to be able to step back, do our own individual regulation, do some of our own processing, and then come back together and revisit whatever parts are relevant of the scenarios we're working with. Timeouts are really important when you're doing intimacy development work. If friendship timeouts aren't as important, because you don't really need timeouts when you're in the friendship layer, you're just in that experience. But again, when you have enough of that friendship development, you are going to start to move up into intimacy development. That's true with yourself. It's also true with others. There will be a natural movement towards those needs once safety and friendship is set up. There's timeouts, there's going from physically living together to not. And then there's just separation in terms of roles in your relationship. There's just different ways that you might separate. Even Bryce and I deciding, do we continue doing the podcast we've been doing? Or do we separate and each do one that supports females and males? Like, how do we want to do this? So how to know if separation is helpful or unhelpful for your relationship if your relationship is a level 3 or above. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, check out Mastering Boundaries. Okay, so 3 things we're looking at. 1, is there a clear purpose that serves each person and the relationship? So if we're going into a separation, whether that's a timeout, whether that's we're going to separate the roles for a period of time, or maybe maybe permanently, or we're actually going to go into a bigger separation, we're going to live in different homes. Is there a clear purpose that serves each person and the relationship? What is the purpose of the separation? So you want to look at, is there a clear purpose? And then the second thing is using that time apart in ways that serve the relationship. So ways that serve both you and the relationship. So, for example, I'll use this podcast again as an example. So Bryce and I are currently separating out the podcast. So we are using this time apart, and we may or may not ever come back together. That may or may not ever be relevant, to our relationship as a couple, because whether or not we podcast together or not is kind of irrelevant to our relationship as a couple. Is it relevant to us as business partners? I don't know, right? If we separate and that helps both of us reach the people that we need to and offer the lessons that we each want to offer, like if we're able to do that through our podcast, through that separation, then it actually serves us as business partners, right? It helps both of us to grow our business. If Bryce does well in his work, it helps me. If I do well in my work, it helps him, because ultimately, as business partners, we're together. So either of our successes can really help. And then if we both get really good at something, then we want to come back together and dance together with it, then we can. But it's kind of like, anytime you're doing something with another person and one or both of you aren't very skilled at it, it's going to make it especially tough to do it together. So, for example, if you go in and try to do a couple's figure skating, for example, if one or both of you don't know how to skate, you're not going to get very far. The goal is you first have to both learn how to skate, both people. Then you can dance together. Then you can skate together. And so, yes, in order to do intimacy development work, and it's the same in business as well, in order to really get aligned and create what you want, you have to get the skills to be able to do it. That's so, so important. And then from there, you can expand into your performance, into your service, into whatever you're offering and giving. But in order to get aligned, you have to become skilled enough to align with what you want. So is there a clear purpose that serves each person in the relationship? Secondly, are you able to use the time apart in ways that serve the relationship? Whether or not you ever even come back together, right? Does being apart help each of you individually? And does it ultimately benefit the relationship, whatever the form of that relationship might be? And the third question to ask is there a coming back together around the aspects that are relevant? So, for example, if Bryce and I are engaging in conversation about something and it starts to get a little energetically heated, and we're like, respectfully disagreeing with each other, but feeling the heat rise and feeling like this is not feeling like it's helpful to our growth as a couple in this moment. It's feeling like we're starting to use some of our survival patterns, our fight, flight, freeze, or fawn energies, anything like that. Then it can be so helpful to take a break. And then what we'll do is we'll come back together and we'll revisit like what was going on there, what started to activate each of our nervous systems, what are we each wanting to be seen on and heard on. So these experiences of differences can actually be really helpful in terms of ingredients or opportunities for greater growth and understanding. And the coming back together can really serve us. And sometimes it takes that separation to do some of that self-reflection. Again, sometimes it can be done in the presence of each other. If you have a witness, so if you're in coaching or therapy and you've got a good witness that both of you trust, then that can be helpful. And sometimes you still need space. Sometimes even after a coaching or therapy session, you might be like, you know what? Maybe there were some insights there, but I still need space. Like I got to figure out what's going on in me. And I often remind myself, if I feel like Bryce is not understanding me and I'm getting triggered by the fact that he's not understanding me, that is a good indicator that I am not understanding myself. Now, there's times he doesn't understand me, and, it would be nice if he would. It'd be frosting on the cake if he would. But I'm not like so triggered or devastated by him not understanding me. If I feel more triggered or hurt or devastated or afraid, like if there's more trigger energy around him not understanding me, that is a good indicator. And I would say every time I have worked with this, it has been true. Ultimately, there is something I'm not totally understanding about myself yet. And that's really where the trigger is often coming from. Now, again, that doesn't mean I wouldn't want him to understand me. It doesn't even mean I wouldn't have feelings, but I don't know. They're not the same. Once I really, really deeply understand myself and there's integration and clarity, then him understanding me just feels like it magnifies the joy that I already feel about being understood by myself. So it is important that there is a coming back together relationally. Now, again, if it's a level 1 or a level 2 issue and you aren't going above that relationally, if you're just like, this is all I'm working on, then the coming back together isn't really the question. Because again, in level 1, level 2 safety issues, we're more concerned about, are you safe? Now, whether or not you come back together is secondary to the safety issue. But in relationships that maintain level 3 at least, and especially in levels that can actually go into level 4 more consistently and above, then we are looking at, is there a coming back together? And again, I'm saying around the aspects that are relevant. Sometimes Bryce and I come back together and we're like, that thing we were just tussling over is sort of irrelevant. Like it's not really the point, right? The point of what was going on and the reason why our nervous systems went up and got triggered was because of this thing, right? This is just like the content. So sometimes Bryce and I come together after we've been tussling about something and we're like, you know what, that thing we were talking about, that's not really relevant. It's not really the issue. It might just be that we have a difference of perspective. It might be that we have a different way of looking at this, or we might even be available to hear each other now, but it still is like that wasn't the issue. The reason one or both of us got triggered was actually this deeper thing. And this was just the content through which we expressed the struggle. So again, there's a coming back together, but it's around what's relevant. So whether that's a timeout, a physical separation, whether it's separating roles or something like that, if there's a coming back together to serve the relationship, then you're looking at what's relevant about it. So again, sometimes with role separation, you might be like, okay, we do this thing together. Let's say you cook together and then you're deciding, you know what, one of us is going to cook and then the other one is going to do laundry and cleaning. So you decide to separate out in terms of how you're navigating roles. Something you once did together, you're now doing separate. So in that situation, the coming back together might just be to reassess, like, okay, how's this working for us? Does this separation of roles feel like it's helping our relationship? And that means, is it helping each of us individually and our relationship, or is it not? Or is there something that needs to be adjusted? So maybe it's like, oh yeah, it's actually working well to have one of us be doing this role and one of us be doing this role. But maybe the thing that wasn't working is instead of eating separate, after one of us cooks, let's at least eat together. And maybe that feels good. So again, there's different ways that you can navigate out this togetherness and this separateness. There's different ways that it will look. You might come back together and you don't necessarily need the roles to merge again. Maybe you just need to come back together and discuss what about it is working and what is not. So there's a lot of different ways that this can work, and there's different things that work for different couples. And I do believe that being able to engage separation at some level in some way is so important to being able to more deeply engage connection and togetherness. There has to be the ability to disconnect in order to more deeply connect. And sometimes I think about it as like the deeper you can root, the higher you can expand. So if you think about a tree, the deeper and the stronger the roots grow, the more it can expand. And it's kind of the same way, right? The deeper we can grow into connection with each other, the more we can expand through the joy of our relationship. But ultimately, I believe separation can be both helpful or unhelpful, depending on different aspects. So what you're looking for is there a clear purpose that serves the timeout or the separation of roles? Are we using the time apart in ways that serve each of us individually and the relationship, right? Because if it only serves one of us individually at the detriment of the relationship, then that separation is not helpful for the relationship. Now, again, if you're at a level 1 or level 2 issue and it's a safety issue, then as a coach, I would say, I don't care whether this is good for your relationship. I only care if it's good for you. And I would want you to ask yourself the same question if it's a safety issue. And then once you resolve that safety issue, from there, you can see whether the relationship can tolerate whatever new boundaries need to be in place for that safety to be maintained. If the relationship can tolerate those new boundaries and it maintains your individual safety, then you can look at okay, maybe it is safe to dance together again. Here's the boundaries we have in place for that. I don't know that there's so many different specifics to that that I would say you probably want professional support when you're really navigating big issues at those layers. Clear purpose, number one, the time apart serves you and the relationship. And number three, there's a coming back together. When those three things are in place in a functional way, separations can be so helpful for a relationship. Now, I will say, back when I was a new therapist and I had a supervisor, one thing that he would remind me of, which to be honest, I haven't looked up, so I don't know if this is accurate still or if it was accurate then, I'm not sure. But one thing he would remind me of is he would say, statistically, if a couple physically separates, they are more likely to divorce. Now, does that mean it's a causation or a correlation? I don't know. I haven't dove into that research. So does it mean that the separation causes the divorce? Or does it mean that people who are already on the road to divorce are more likely to separate because separation is often a step in that process? So I don't know, but I do like to tell clients sometimes just a heads up that there is this, at least this correlation potentially. So it might be that if you do separate, you are more likely to divorce. But again, there are times when not separating, when it's really important to do so, could actually hinder the relationship either healing or becoming more functional. So I have also seen situations in which a separation is extremely helpful to a relationship when it is done with support, clarity, boundaries, a lot of purpose, a lot of clarity, and a lot of specific agreements. In those situations, a separation can be very helpful in terms of supporting the relationship in a new way. Now, again, the smaller separations like timeouts, same thing, I would say timeouts are so helpful when you know how to do a good timeout. Timeouts where the couple just parts ways and then never comes back and revisits important issues, those timeouts will break down a relationship. But it's not because a timeout is the problem, it's because that couple doesn't know how to do timeouts in a way that's functional. So it does matter that in those situations, it does matter that there's a coming back together and revisiting what parts are relevant to the relational dynamic. Okay, so I hope that that gives you all something to think about. If you have any questions, please feel free to send emails to jenny@jennymorrow.com. I'll be answering questions sometimes on this podcast. Okay, I think that is it. Sending you all lots of care. Take care.